Who's up first?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Curley. I'm the first selectman of the town of Portland, and I will now call this special meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education to order at 6:33 p.m., and I will now turn the presentation over to our superintendent, Dr. Britton. Dr. Britton.
Can you all hear me okay? Hello, thank you for everyone for coming. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Charles Britton. I'm your superintendent of schools, and I have been looking forward to this presentation. It's been 2 years in the making. So my goal tonight is to give you an overview of what it would take if Portland were to move forward with a school consolidation. I have a lot of ground to cover with you tonight. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Let me just sort of start us off with a little bit of overview of what this meeting is and where we're headed from here. So I have two screens going. First of all, this up here is for the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen. We have that screen going for anybody who's here watching in the back. I know we have people watching on Zoom and on YouTube Live. So tonight's presentation is going to be recorded. I'll have it posted on the school website tomorrow, and then anybody can watch it thereafter. I'll also post this presentation, and I'll reference a number of other supporting materials that are online. For the purpose of tonight's meeting is a joint Board of Education, Board of Selectmen meeting. So my audience tonight is the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen. I know we have lots of interested community members who are here to visit. We don't have audience of citizens on our agenda tonight. What that means is that I won't be taking questions from anybody who's not on the Board of Education or Board of Selectmen. Certainly I'll entertain questions from Board of Education and Board of Selectmen members. But that said, anybody who's here who does have questions, I'm going to be here Thursday night this week at 6 o'clock. I'll have a community forum right here. I'll be back. Angela, come on. Monday next week and Wednesday next week. So I've scheduled myself for some forums at 6 o'clock. At those meetings, I'll answer any questions or entertain any comments. Additionally, there is audience of citizens on our next two Board of Education meetings for the May 7th and May 21st, and I know that the Board of Selectmen also has audience of citizens, and those are opportunities for the community to give comments. Just as a reminder, at audience of citizens, at least my Board of Education doesn't engage in a back and forth. It's not a forum. There's no discussion. The board will certainly entertain comments. If people want to come have a discussion about what I'm presenting tonight, the opportunity for that would be at those forums this Thursday and then next Monday and Wednesday. And of course, in the meantime, people are always welcome to call me, or I put my email up here, Laurel Steinhauser, the board chair's email, and then Ryan Curley's email up here. This would be an opportunity to, again, email comments or feedback, ask questions. What I'll make sure is anybody who emails me comments shows up in my correspondence to the board, so that the Board of Education is getting feedback from anybody who wants to provide it. So we'll have plenty of opportunities for the community to get information, ask questions, or otherwise share feedback with the decision makers in town, those being the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen. Okay, next slide, please. So I do have a statement, and I'm calling this a statement on civil discourse. I'm going to read this, and I feel like it's necessary for me to just kind of put this out there to get us all thinking about what our goals and my intentions are with this presentation. So I fully recognize that the presentation I'm about to make will invite a spirited discussion. I am presenting information that affects individuals' careers, finances, and most importantly, Portland's children. There are bound to be strong opinions. All I ask is that everyone keeps an open mind and assumes good intentions. I also ask that we engage in civil discourse. We can disagree without being disagreeable and express our opinions without damaging the relationships that define the strength of our community. We need to remember that our children are watching, and we need to be good role models. We also need to remember that the democratic process will allow everyone to express their opinion at the ballot box. As part of my presentation, I will provide some historical context for how we arrived at this moment. It is not my intention to disparage the work or decisions of previous leaders or leadership teams in Portland. I assume good intentions. Leadership is difficult, and hindsight is always 20/20. If anything I say is construed as reflecting negatively on previous decision-making in Portland, I apologize. That is not my intention. Finally, I have done my best to organize complicated information. I intend to be as transparent as possible and share that information and my analysis of that information. I accept the reality that people will not agree with my analysis and may have different information. If so, please share that analysis and information with me. I am prepared to adjust my opinions and correct the record if anything I say tonight is inaccurate or uses faulty logic. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so here's where I'd like to start. I won't go all the way back to the 1930s, but I do think it's appropriate for us to start at some point in time to understand how we got here tonight. Okay, so I'm going to start back to 1990. Okay. Certainly, his education in Portland was happening before 1990, but I think a good starting, a good jumping in point would be for us to understand what happened from 1990 to present in order for us to get the appropriate context about what I'm going to be presenting tonight. So from 1990 to 2004, the Portland Public Schools were organized in 4 schools, right? You had Valley View, that served students in grades pre-K to 2, Gildersleeve, grades 3 to 5, Brownstone Intermediate School, which had grades 6, 7, and 8 in it, and then you had the high school that was serving students in grades 9 through 12. That was your grade level configuration, 4 schools, up until 2004. We can advance the slide. In 2004, Portland added a 5th school. Okay, so from 2000 to 2005, there was discussion in Portland about the condition of the high school. We have to know that in the early 2000s, the condition of the high school was not good. It was in need of a lot of work. It was actually in danger of losing its accreditation because of the condition of the facilities. At that time, late 90s, early 2000s, a group similar to ones that have been working on this presentation tonight started meeting and talking about how to renovate the high school to fix up what were the deteriorating conditions in the high school. Concurrent with that, a decision was made by that committee and the town as a whole to add the middle school. So in the early 2000s, the building you're in was renovated to new to create this, and the middle school next door was newly constructed. Now at that time, you could have moved students at Brownstone. You could have moved grades 6, 7, and 8 to the middle school. There was more than enough space there. When the middle school was built, you added way more square footage than you needed in this town. And grades 6, 7, and 8 could have come to the middle school, and Brownstone then would have been essentially decommissioned as a school. I studied a lot about what was happening in Portland at the time that led to the decision not to close Brownstone. And it came down to really one thing. At Valley View, there were portable classrooms. For those of you who don't know, these are classrooms that are not designed to be in any case long-term. They're essentially temporary structures that schools often bring in when they don't have enough space. The portable classrooms at that time were servicing students in grade 2 at Valley View, and they were starting to show their age. Again, portable classrooms are not something that are long-lasting. The town recognized that there would have been an added expense to take the portables out and add the square footage necessary for the 2nd grade at Valley View, and decided not to do that, but then recognized that without those portable classrooms, if you closed Brownstone, there wasn't going to be enough space. So the deteriorating conditions at Valley View led to a decision not to move grades 6 through 8 to the middle school, but instead only move grades 7 and 8 to the middle school, which then created these configurations. You had Valley View, which at that time was pre-K, K1, 2, Gildersleeve 3, 4, Brownstone 5, 6, middle school 7, 8, high school 9, 12. In 2015, those portable classrooms finally fell completely apart. Some of the teachers will tell you that they were just not serviceable anymore. In 2015, those portables were taken off of Valley View, and second grade was moved to Gildersleeve. That brings us to our current grade level configuration. It works. By adding the middle school, you added an awful lot of square footage. The district is way overbuilt. Some of you remember that the town got in a little bit of trouble for that when the reimbursement rates were determined by the state. And of course, there was an awful lot of overhead and expense added by bringing the middle school on without closing the school. So it was only in 2000 that you went from 4 schools to 5 schools because of this decision not to close Brownstone. Next slide, please. So these are the 3 elementary schools that are currently important. You have Valley View. Original construction was in 1953, and there were additions in 1958 and 1992. At Gildersleeve, original construction was in 1964, with an addition in 1991. And Brownstone, original construction as a high school in 1931, with additions in 1955, 1966, 1992. You start to see a 30-year pattern here. Since 1991, no major capital projects that have required bonding, that's how I'm defining major capital projects, have been done at Valley View, Gildersleeve, or Brownstone. So no area of the building has been subject to major capital improvements since 1992. And significant areas of the building have had no major capital investments since the 1930s, 1950s, and 1960s. I have our facilities director here. I'm sure he's nodding his head when he'll tell you that sometimes when things break at our schools, he's going in and finding very vintage equipment and infrastructure in those buildings. So no major capital investments have been made at any elementary school since 1991, and in some areas of the building since the 30s, 50s, and 60s. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a really important slide, and I want to be clear here. As a function of time and general wear and tear, these buildings are showing their age. I want to address 2 things, and it's really important to me to say this. I've heard some comments that some folks feel that maybe it's been a function of poor maintenance and upkeep that the buildings reach the condition they're in now. That is a fallacy. I can tell you, Bob Shea, before him Carl Johnson, and before him Paul Bankston, and their crews have done an amazing job keeping these schools going. It is not their fault in any way that the schools have deteriorated to the condition they're in now. As a matter of fact, Portland owes them gratitude for keeping them going as long, as they have. It is time and general wear and tear that has brought us to this point. I've also heard some people throw some complaints out there that, well, hey, if Portland had funded a capital improvements, we might not be in this position. I can't argue with that. Certainly, every year I've brought forward capital improvement requests. Those have often been taken out as part of the budget development process. It's difficult work to put forward a budget that balances needs with the impact on taxes and mill rates. And oftentimes, boards of education and boards of selectmen are making difficult decisions about what to fund, and those capital requests are often the first things to come out. For example, this year I requested $1,500,000 to upgrade some HVAC systems. That is not going forward to the town as part of our LEA budget this spring. So it is true that we could have done a better job over the years funding a capital improvement cycle, but I fully understand the difficulties of creating a budget the community can sustain that meets other needs. So it truly is a function of time and general wear and tear that's gotten us to the point where we are. In 2019, the Board of Education was very much recognizing and hearing at that time from Carl Johnson, and was also hearing from Paul Bankston at that time, that the buildings were starting to need some serious work and reaching a point beyond what general maintenance could do for them. The Board of Education, I think, made a very wise decision to invest in a company called Sightlines. Sightlines came in, and if you look at the date here, February 2020, we all remember what happened in March 2020. Right before the pandemic, Sightlines was hired. They were asked to do a facility analysis. It actually worked out because the schools were closed in March, April, and May of that year because of the pandemic, which emptied out the buildings, which really gave Sightlines the opportunity to be in all of our buildings without the students and faculty here to take a look at them. That summer of the pandemic, 2020, Sightlines presented a report to a joint Board of Education, Board of Selectmen meeting and identified $28,199,000 worth of investments that needed to be made in the schools to keep them running. You notice the date, summer 2020, we all know the inflationary cycle that we got caught in since 2020, so you really need to add, and I'll show you some real numbers, 20 to 25% to that number to account for escalations in labor and the cost of materials to bring us up to date. And also we had that same experience with our track. Okay, so this happened in 2020. Next slide, please. The Board of Education recognized that $28 million is a good amount of money. We should go through the process of determining whether maintaining 3 elementary schools and doing that work that Sightlines identified is the best next step. We did some work in the 2020-2021 year as a Board of Education. It was also a very complicated year because you have a new superintendent trying to open schools after a pandemic. But we did have a board committee looking at this. We started to share our research with the Board of Selectmen in 2021. The Board of Selectmen heard that and said, we like where you're going. We'd like to formalize that process. So the Board of Selectmen formed a facility study committee. That committee met from August 9th, 2021 to May 8th, 2023. Almost 12 months ago, last June, I presented that facility study report to a joint Board of Education, Board of Selectmen meeting. That facility study report and all of the supporting documents are on the website if anybody wants to go take a look. It's all right there. I would say that that was one of the most comprehensive processes I've ever been through. 2 members of the Board of Education were on that committee, 2 members of the Board of Selectmen were on that committee, as well as representatives from the community. We did a ton of work, including all of these things. I don't think we left a single stone unturned. We put our time in, and I thought put together a very comprehensive report led by an incredibly capable and I think very intelligent chair of that committee in the form of Lou Parr. Can't thank him enough for that and getting us to this point. Next slide, please. So, one of the most important things that that committee did right at the outset was establish these priorities. We felt like whatever recommendations we come forward, in rank order of importance, we need to make sure we're providing high-quality academic space for our students. We need to make sure we're providing academic space that promotes a positive school climate and culture. Brief comment on the state of our current facilities. They are serviceable. Our students are in academic space where they're learning at the highest level that we can provide services and doing everything we can to promote that school climate and culture. I think I will tell you, and most of our principals and teachers will tell you, we could be doing better because of the age and general condition of the facilities. Creation of buildings designed to maximize school security. All of our buildings at the elementary school level were designed by architects pre-Columbine, more or less pre-Newtown. We're doing our best. I think our students are safe, but certainly we could be doing a lot better with facilities designed with current security measures in mind in the post-Columbine, post-Newtown era. Creation of buildings designed to maximize heating, air conditioning, and indoor air quality. Ugh. Let me just say ugh. Our building air quality is not where it needs to be. When the heat index gets above 90 degrees, I am forced to dismiss schools early. None of our buildings have air conditioning. None of our buildings have really indoor air quality that circulates. They all have heating, but even Mr. Shea will tell you that we work really hard to keep it working. Certainly, indoor air quality is a priority that all of our elementary schools need focus on. Creation of buildings designed to maximize energy efficiency. Our buildings are, if there's 5-star, we might be a -1 star. So our buildings bleed energy. They don't have the windows and all of the things that create for high quality energy efficient buildings. Certainly we could be doing better there, and that could certainly generate some savings for us and contribute to minimizing our carbon footprint. Creation of learning space that optimizes teaching and learning is cost effective for the future. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time tonight talking about how I define cost effective, but we know whatever decisions we make now is going to put Portland on a trajectory into the future. Just like the decision made to add the middle school without closing Brownstone put us on a trajectory in terms of staffing and maintenance and upkeep of 5 buildings. Whatever decisions we make now have ripple effects for many years to come in terms of the people and upkeep that we need to sustain those buildings. So cost effective is certainly right at the forefront of our mind, and I know it's going to be a crucial consideration as people consider whether this is something they'll support. Creation of capacity for potential future enrollment. We've done 2 enrollment studies. We are seeing ourselves, at least for the next year, as pretty stable in terms of enrollment, but who knows? Anything could happen. We need to make sure that we're keeping our eye on what would happen if more students ended up in the Portland Public Schools. ADA compliance is a function of law and creation of space that the community can enjoy when the schools aren't using it. So those priorities guided our work. Next slide. Okay. I shared that self-study, facility study report with the Board of Selectmen in June. The Board of Selectmen made a decision that this is a lot. We're asking a lot here. We want to go out and canvass our town. We need to find out what more people think. Certainly the facility study group did some focus groups, but we didn't get input from the entire community. So the Board of Selectmen made a decision this fall to hire Great Blue to go out and do this survey with the entire town. This was a survey that was accessible online. Also, a QR code was mailed in a postcard to every home in Portland. I'm aware of criticism that I've read and heard about the methodology used and whether it's a fair representation of what people in the town feel. I trust Great Blue. They are a professional outfit. This is what they do, right? This wasn't a Survey Monkey or a Google form that we sent out. This was something that the town paid for and commissioned a professional company to go out and do. At the end of that survey, we took a look at the results. 56.9% of the respondents indicated that consolidating to a single pre-K-5 school and moving the 6th grade to the middle school was the preferred option. So that's what's made us decide to move forward in further exploration of that option, which brought us up to today. Next slide, please. This fall, I met with my leadership team, and we wrote what's called an Ed Specifications Plan. An Ed Specifications Plan outlines the space needs and all of the community values that we would look for an architect to bring into a rendering. I shared that education specifications plan for a pre-K-5 with another professional company, Friar Architects. And Friar Architects reviewed that. They actually worked with me to make sure that the Ed Specs plan looked good. And then they used it to design what's about to be presented to you now, which is what that Ed Specs plan would look like if it were to become a reality for Portland. So I'm happy to introduce, we have Mike Serrano and Bryce Sens from Friar Architects. Mike, Bryce, you want to come on up? You can talk us through how you use the education specifications plan and what they might look like in terms of the 3D models and the blocking diagrams. So if we go to the next slide.
Is there a slide that shows the building program?
Next one. Next one. That one.
Evening, everybody. Mike Serrano with Fryer. So the educational specification that was just referred to is a document that the State Department of Education requires as part of the grant application. And what it really is this is the needs of the district, and this is the request for funding of that project. And there's a lot of pieces that are involved in that, but one of the most important one of them, on top of this is how we want to educate our kids, this is the safety, this is the big adjectives of a school, is how big is the building going to be and what rooms are in it. So we had a long discussion about in consolidation, and we actually looked at about 9 or 10 different scenarios on how to consolidate and what the different configurations of the school district would be. This is an overview of the consolidation that we're talking about tonight. And what's important about this is not just the number of classrooms and the number of arts and gymnasium and library and media center, but what's important about this is that it meets the state space standards. Essentially, when the state reimburses a school building project, they reimburse on square foot per student. I'm paraphrasing here, it's a much more complex calculation than that, but it's essentially square foot per student. That was one of the issues with the middle school project that was done here 20 years ago. This is to assure you that the ed spec that was written and what we designed meets that educational space standard so that you're maximizing your state reimbursement to the best of our ability in space alone. There's other adjectives involved in the cooling, the heating, what type of atmosphere is in the building. But most importantly, this is the treasure map on how to design the building. And I'm going to hand it over to Bryce to talk about the building design itself. And what's important is that this isn't the final building design, just as a concept. We needed to design a preliminary building here so that we could do an accurate cost budget for you. It's not a final cost estimate. The construction document of a building of this complexity would be hundreds and hundreds of pages. But we put together a design, we put together a materials list, we put together a construction phasing. We've shared it with 2 major contractors that build schools daily. They've used their cost numbers. So we needed to give them something to react to give us a budget. And so everything that Bryce and I are going to present is where the budget came from.
Next slide, please. That'll work. Thank you, Mike. So one of the first things I'm going to discuss is a term that Charles had mentioned earlier in his presentation, which is renovate as new. So what we're showing you here is a renovate as new of the Valley View School. Renovate is new essentially means that we're turning this into a brand new school. We're taking a school that exists, but it's being modified to meet the current building code, the current energy code, current accessibility requirements. So essentially, what you're going to have in the end is a brand new facility. We'll be keeping certain portions of the structure, the slabs, steel, things like that, which we're indicating in blue here. That's your existing Valley View School. Everything in red is additions onto the building. You'll also see large, thick dashed lines. Those are areas of the existing facility that in this schematic plan we're planning on demolishing, and I'll get into why we are proposing that as I move through the floor plan. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is the proposed floor plan. I'm going to step away from the mic a little bit here, and I'll try to project so everyone can hear me so I can point at things. But one of the things that we looked at while coming up with this schematic design were the separation of different age groups within the school. We've got a large range of age groups within the school, starting at pre-K up to 5th grade. And when you have that large range, you want to make sure that you're not cross-pollinating those age groups as much as possible, keeping the pre-K kids away from the 5th grade kids. So I'll start on the far left-hand side of the sheet here, where we have our pre-K condition. That's where we have all of those pre-K facilities. We're showing each classroom with a shared bathroom in between it. It's a very important thing to have for that age range. And then as we move across the floor plan in this direction, we move into our 1st grade and 2nd grade. There's also, probably on the next slide, but don't go there yet, there's also a 2nd story above this. So within this portion of the building, right here, you have your pre-K through third grade program spaces, classrooms. One of the strategies we took with this conceptual design was to separate the younger kids from the older kids with some of your shared spaces. It wasn't completely possible to do this 100%, but what we did was we have a relocated media center right here, relocated and rebuilt within the existing footprint simply because with the new population of the school, you're going to need a larger media center to accommodate that student population. Same goes for your cafeteria. Your existing cafeteria currently sits up in this area of the building. We're showing a new cafeteria right here to, again, accommodate the larger increased school population that we're proposing. And then right next to that cafeteria is your kitchen situated on the site to allow for easy deliveries for food service. This teal rectangle you see right here would be an enlarged admin office. Your current admin office sits within this area, but it's much smaller. Larger admin office directly adjacent to the main entry of the school to address items that Charles had mentioned, such as security. So that admin office has a good eyes on that main entrance to the school. Moving up north on the sheet, this is your 4th and 5th grade wing. There is, if you recall on the last slide, there's a small addition off to this side, just to accommodate the square footage that we needed to provide within those classrooms. Up to the north of that, even further, is your arts wing with your music, art room, and your gymnasium as well. There is a small buffer area here of a corridor to kind of separate some of those louder spaces from your academic spaces for the 4th and 5th grade wing. The gymnasium is where it is currently. The only modification that we've proposed to the gymnasium is the addition of a stage off of it in lieu of providing a full auditorium in this school. The OSCGR, the state, likes to see multi-function spaces that can be used throughout the day as opposed to just a standalone auditorium that could be used a few times a year. So that was the approach we took with that. Also looking at this plan, we have some outdoor play areas. This is for your younger children, outdoor play area here in a secure area of the site. It's not in the front of the building. It's not near any traffic, any vehicular roads that could pose a threat to those areas, as well as another play area out here for the older children. Next slide, please. I had previously mentioned this. This is the second story above the pre-K through 3rd grade wing. Down in this area, that's your pre-K wing. We didn't have necessity to put a second story above that, but we have some other 3rd grade, 2nd grade classrooms on this second story up here above that one. Next slide, please. Just talking about the site quickly, we took some measures to alleviate some of the traffic and congestion concerns that you guys typically see during drop-off and pickup times at the school, and accomplish that in a few ways. One, first is this is your pre-K wing right here. We have a dedicated pre-K drop-off area for that specific wing. So any parents dropping off or picking up their children to that portion of the school have their own dedicated drop-off area that's separated from a bus loop that we're showing here. The yellow dashed line represents your bus loop, which is, again, separated from a parent drop-off loop that's indicated in the blue dashed line. The separation of these traffic patterns is very important. You don't want your parent loop crossing the traffic pattern of your bus loop, with kids getting off the bus, and creating a hazardous situation. There is parking associated with each one of those loops. At the pre-K loop, there's staff parking proposed on the interior of the bus loop. And then what we're calling this over here, when it's not being used for parent drop-off, is event parking. There's an additional 100 spots over here proposed in this event parking area, which has immediate access to your gymnasium with the stage and a separate entrance at that end of the school. Next slide. This slide, it shows the potential for expansion onto this school, something that we thought about during this schematic design, during the process of putting it together. The areas in purple that are shown with dashed lines around them show the potential for expansion onto this facility in the future. As Charles had mentioned, I think currently your student population is projected as pretty even across the years, but we don't know how that's going to change in the future. So there was some thought put into the possibility of expanding this building, the necessity of expanding this building in the future if required. Next slide. Early on, we had the renderings of the building, so hopefully you got a chance
You want to go
see
back
them.
and show the 3D model, go like 4 slides back. Keep going.
One more, there you go. There's some renderings that we had put together of the building. As Mike had mentioned, we worked closely with the construction manager to develop costs based on materials that we're showing in this rendering and, the style of construction that we're showing here. So to stick with kind of a local Connecticut, Middletown feel, we selected materials that we thought represented the town. Brownstone and darker colors, things like that, and also just took some inspiration from some local elements for the design of the facade of this facility.
All right, thank you guys. All right, so why don't we keep going? And I'm sure people are going to have questions. Mike and Bryce are going to be here, and I'm here. We'll wait till the end, and then we'll get to some questions, but we still have some more ground to cover. So if you could go forward a slide, I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going, Scott. Oh, back one more. Okay, so we know from our focus groups and in the community, there's a lot of questions about how this school would operate. Would there be too many lunch waves? How could we fit students in pre-K 5 to pre-K to 5 into one school? So we felt like, and we need to answer those questions to make sure people were comfortable with what it would look like when a larger elementary school were available for our students. So I asked Ryan Wallstrom to go visit some schools, and you'll see here he visited Windermere Elementary School, Marlborough Elementary School, and Orchard Hill Elementary School. These are schools that are pre-K 5 schools that would be approximately the same size as this pre-K 5 school in Portland. And I asked Ryan, go visit those schools, get their schedules, observe, talk to their principals and teachers, and find out how those work, and then present that as a possibility. Again, this is a concept. I think both what you saw with Fryer's presentation is a concept, not exactly how it's going to go. We have a ways to go before we got there. But certainly what I've asked Mr. Wallstrom to present to you tonight is a concept for what and how a pre-K 5 elementary school would operate. All right, come on up.
Good evening, everyone. In addition to visiting these 3 elementary schools, and really I'm here tonight, and what Charles asked me to do was to answer the question, what does this look like for our students? How, if in any ways, does our day in and our day out change? So it was great to visit these schools, and you're going to see a lot of what follows on the next few slides comes from those visitations. But in addition to that, in my previous role as assistant principal, it was a pre-K 4 school of about 650 students. So I have that background, and I started my teaching career in a pre-K 5 elementary school of about 400 to 450 students. So actually, when I came to Gildersleeve, it was much smaller than the schools that I had worked in previously. Next slide, please. So I think here with this slide, it shows one of the most exciting opportunities that lies ahead in this consolidation project. And that is to build one elementary school that has its own culture, climate, and its own identity. Up here, we actually just redesigned our logo for Gildersleeve, and I put that up there to remind us that that logo, along with the logos from the other 2 elementary schools, is a place that will start. And really, it's retiring those logos and figuring out what is our new mascot, what is our identity, with the consolidated school. I've been up at this podium and I've talked, several times about the work that we've done as a professional learning community at Gildersleeve School. In the last couple of years, we've redefined our mission, our vision, values, what our commitments are. And that's been great, and it's had a huge impact on the culture and the student achievement at Gildersleeve. But we'll start that work back over because we're taking staff and faculty from 2 other schools, students from 2 other schools, and we get to redefine that. And then third is just developing what the expectations are for the new school. We did this work 7 years ago when I came here. This is just an example of the way to be, or the Gildersleeve Bees at Gildersleeve School. But we get to, it's almost stale now. It is our culture, and we're fortunate that it is ingrained in our staff and our students, but we get to reinvent that, which is exciting. Next slide, please. These next few slides show that a version, an example of what the schedule could look like. I did a lot of this work in isolation based on my visits to the other schools and my previous experience into larger elementary schools. This is work that we certainly would do with the input of the new faculty and staff if we were going into the consolidated school. This does show up here that starting, it's a question that I would ask as a parent. I have a 4th grader, I have a 7th grader, and I would ask, how early is my child going to have lunch, or how late with this large school? And this is just one example where lunch would start at 10:50 in the morning, and it would go, there would be 5 lunch waves, and it would end at 1:35 in the afternoon. Now this is based on 5 sections, 5 classes at every grade level, kindergarten up through 5th grade, which is perfect scheduling scenario and absolutely never happens. And just one example to show where we could consolidate 4th and 5th grade. We could potentially consolidate, kindergarten and 1st grade and 2nd and 3rd and only have 3 lunch waves, which is what we have at Gildersleeve now. That's really going to depend on sections and numbers. But it'd be hard pressed to find a situation where we couldn't combine at least 2 grade levels, and that still, like I said, gets us started with lunch at 10:50 and ending with recess at 2:05 in the afternoon. Another really important piece of this is, can we still provide the level of intervention and special education services for students with a school this large? And when you look at this schedule here, it shows that if we had 2 reading specialists, which we have 3 across the district now, 2 math specialists, and across the elementary schools, I should say, not across the district. 2 reading specialists, 2 math specialists, and 5 special education teachers, continuing to keep the RISE program, which is one of our specialized special education programs, and the Bridge program. We could still have 1 block of uninterrupted intervention time across the day, from kindergarten all the way up through 5th grade. Next slide, please. I know that one concern when you go from our great small neighborhood schools, and one of them being pre-K through 1st grade, is it could be kind of scary at taking preschoolers or 1st graders and putting them with 5th graders. And one of the really neat pieces of the designs of this school is that it's really designed as 3 schools or 3 neighborhoods, even though it's 1 building. The architects talked a little bit about this previously. This here is another zoomed in picture of our preschool. Literally has its own parking lot, entrance and exit, its own section of the school, and that would stay very similar with 2 classes, or it would be 4 classes, 2 AM classes and 2 PM classes that would meet 4 days a week as they do now. Next slide, please. Second would be our 2nd and 3rd grade neighborhood of the school, which is actually the 2nd story of the school. There are 10 classrooms, so we could potentially have 10 sections up there. This is just a sample schedule that shows, and most important is really ELA and mathematics. They continue to have 90 minutes of ELA, 90 minutes of math, and that fits in the day. Our 2nd grade schedule actually looks very similar to this at Gildersleeve right now. Next slide, please. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. As you might remember, we departmentalized 3rd and 4th grade, and then our 5th grade is departmentalized at Brownstone as well. One of the pieces that's really neat is when you look at the entrance of the school and you think of where the gymnasium is at Valley View right now, that section of the school between the entrance and the gym really will be the 4th and 5th grade section of the school, where they can predominantly stay in that area. So it's not like a 5th grader is going to go to the bathroom and meet a preschooler. The school isn't set up like that. So there's this 4th section, and there's an opportunity to continue to departmentalize 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade with a 2-teacher team or a 3-person team, which is very similar to what we do now. Now, again, this is just to show that it works and it could fit. You could have this schedule. You could have a 1st grade schedule that is self-contained across the full day, and a preschool schedule which is only a half day, and it works in the large building. Next slide, please. This is a sample of what our special schedule could look like. So our students would continue to have one special every day for 40 minutes. Art, music, library, and physical education would stay the same. I think there's opportunity in this as well to add something like STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, and math. If you add the A, there's an art component, or even to consider a foreign language component that comes down to our elementary school. Which could come down, as early as kindergarten. I've seen that. I've worked in buildings that have that before, or sometimes even 3rd grade. And then this is, I brainstormed this list with the leadership team at my school, and there are many, many benefits of being consolidated. One is leadership opportunities like a student council for our 4th and 5th grade, which is not something that's been strong in the time that I've been at Gildersleeve. Less transitions for students. It feels like at the elementary level, they just get comfortable in 1st grade, and we're transitioning to my school or to Gildersleeve to 2nd grade. They just get comfortable in 4th grade, and then it's another transition. So we'd have fewer of those. This is one of my favorites, the stronger elementary curriculum alignment. For as collaborative as our teachers and our staff are in the town of Portland, it's so difficult when you're in different buildings. So to have one building where we could take those delayed openings, those professional development days, and really do some vertical work, vertical curriculum alignment, pre-K all the way up through 5th grade would be fantastic. It'll be easier for teachers to collaborate. There will be opportunities for more extracurricular activities. Sometimes it's just something because we're in that pocket at Gildersleeve with 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, a little bit too young for some things, but really our 4th graders, if they were with 5th graders, they could be doing some of those clubs. Earlier participation in band and chorus, it's a great opportunity to beef up our music program, which is already fantastic in this district, but to bring that down to an earlier age. More time for families to build strong relationships with faculty and staff. So rather than 2 years or 3 years, they could potentially have 5 or 6 years, with the same teachers or at least the same faculty in the building. Easier coordination for families with students in multiple grades. So, this is kind of silly, but anybody who's a parent out there, if you have one spirit week at Valley View and another at Gildersleeve and another at Brownstone, you can start to lose your mind. So again, that's something that we would do as one school community. Consistency with intervention and special education services. Again, that goes right along with when we talk about intervention and less transitions. They'll be working with the same reading specialist, the same math specialist, and so forth for a longer period of time. The elementary special education programs and the multilingual program. Right now, our teacher of multilingual learners travels across all the schools in Portland. In this case, it would be 2 facilities that he or she would travel between. It's the new bridge program that's been developed for some of our special education students is phenomenal in so many ways. It was such a needed program, but it becomes very difficult with it being housed at Brownstone, while a lot of the students are really 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade students at Gildersleeve, or even younger students at Valley View. Less transportation coordination, that it would be a dream at the end of the day to have all of the buses show up at Gildersleeve or one elementary school, and we just load them versus being on the cycle where they have to go to Brownstone and they have to go to Valley View as well. We make it work. It would just make life so much easier. And then just the longer-term relationships with the faculty and staff. Especially our fourth grader teachers build phenomenal relationships with their students, and then they're off to Brownstone. So, many, many benefits of, the consolidated school. Yep.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Ryan. So the other big change, of course, would be the sixth grade coming to the middle school. Right? What would that mean? How would that work? Do we have the space for it? Would we have to do any additions at the middle school? So I asked Charles Horshon, Chuck Horshon is the principal of the middle school, to spend a little time with us, helping us understand, does the middle school have the bandwidth and capacity for the sixth grade tomorrow or shortly thereafter?
Well, I'll start by saying, we talk about tomorrow, Charles. I think I need a little bit more lead time for that. But ultimately, this has never been a surprise for me. One of my performance tasks when I was hired here at Portland was to envision how would you one day look at sixth grade becoming part of the middle school, something that's very common across the board, something I talked about in my initial interviews, because I was part of becoming an assistant principal in my previous district upon their bringing in sixth grade to their middle school during a school consolidation project. It's something that a number of our towns around us have, with sixth grade being part of the middle school. And it's something that I truly think is a huge valuable asset to us as a school community. It enables so many more opportunities for our school, and it allows us to not be a place where we are transitioning kids from elementary and middle school one year and then transitioning them to the high school the next year, but truly allows us to plan for what a middle school experience is. So I'm going to talk about how that looks tonight. One thing I'll preface that with is I have not gone and visited all the other local middle schools to look what it is. This has been a little later in the process for me, not wanting to go too far too quickly before the surveys came back and identified that the desire was for sixth grade to come up to middle school. Now that that charge has been put there, like Ryan, I did a lot of this work in isolation tonight. My first step is going to be putting a committee together to talk about how would sixth grade come in a meaningful and positive way. How would we embed our programs correctly? How would we embed our students correctly? How would we embed our parents in a way that helps them feel at ease sending their sixth graders up to a middle school campus and not thinking of it so much as sending them to a place that has our high school with it as well? And talk about how that structure would ensure that their child is getting that middle years experience that they need and not feeling like it was too much too fast for them. So we'll go to the next slide and I'll kind of show. The charge here tonight, though, is simply to show, can it fit? Can it work? Can it be done? And the answer upon my first entrance to Portland Middle School was a resounding yes. One of the things when Charles was touring me around the building, as I quickly noticed exactly what Charles said previously. The original middle school was built to have a lot more space than it accommodated student needs. There were 4 or 5 empty classrooms along my original walk around the middle school when I first got hired. So what I show you tonight, and unfortunately I don't have Fryer to put together really nice renderings for me. I just took our old on-paper schematics and tried to blow them up best I could with my own graphic design skill. But what you can see is the middle school can clearly fit and it utilizes all of our space. I'm not just thinking about the classrooms on 2 hallways that we have. I'm thinking about what used to be a giant computer lab that we no longer have use for because kids have Chromebooks in their hands, and how that could become a very nice lab space for a special education classroom. But what you'll see in blue here, that's our 8th grade floor currently. In light blue, you'll see that maintains 8th grade. In green on the top, that would be 6th grade. 6th grade would stay on their own more isolated hallway to start off with. The 7th grade would be on one side of that hallway, on the same side of both the top floor where 6th grade would be and the bottom floor where 8th grade is, and they would traverse just one stairwell. But again, their classes would all be focused on one side, so that they don't have too far to travel as well. We'd be able to put lockers appropriately spaced around the homeroom. We'd be able to schedule it so that kids are in their safe, welcoming 6th grade focused, 8th grade focused, and 7th grade focused components. We have the science lab space, the double capacity in all of our science lab rooms. We would easily be able to implement science under OSHA requirements within this model with ease. One of the things that I'm very proud of in this model, sometimes when you embed a school together, and this happened in my previous district, it does result in some staff members not having a home and having to be on carts to have their programs be implemented. That is not necessary here. That space that was previously available has then results in every classroom being used every classroom having a dedicated purpose, and every teacher having a dedicated home. So we don't have teachers having to go from room 411 to room 310 to room 206 at different times of the day. Teachers don't have to be on carts. They're in their dedicated location. They can make their classroom the warm, inviting place that they need it to be. Again, 6th and 8th have their own hallway. 7th grade would be split. Next slide. So talking about the middle school program of studies. Currently our program of studies is 5 blocked academic courses, as well as 2 blocks of unified arts. And we would continue that for a 6th grade. We could very easily maintain those unified arts offerings for 6th grade. It would require us in looking at not only increasing by 5 6th grade academic teachers that we'll be bringing over to Portland Middle School to help the core academics for our students, but also looking at how are we expanding and strengthening our unified arts curriculum. What areas do we need more unified arts programming? What areas do we need them to be required? Where does that allow for middle schoolers to have electives beyond just band and chorus? Is this an opportunity where we can talk about bringing world language, a program we've talked about for a long time, bringing down to lower levels, down to at least 6th grade to get started then? This gives us a lot of that opportunity. As you can see here, each grade level would have 5 core academics. 8th grade is when world language becomes a core academic. They would have unified arts wheel that all students would have experiences with, and they would have elective options, whether it's band, chorus, or what really excites me here is the increase of computer science programming, family consumer science program, music tech, those career and technical education programs that truly we want to strengthen here at Portland. Because when we get to 8th grade, when we talk about what are the programs we lose 8th graders to when they leave our school system, it's not to Xavier and to Mercy, it's to the technical schools these days. So showing these really strong programs we have here at Portland Middle School, and that exist fully right now with our fantastic Portland High Schools, you can see with our students here tonight, we want to make sure that we're displaying that really strong program as we push it forward to what they can best be. And start that alignment earlier with 6th graders, as opposed to just a little bit in 7th, a little bit in 8th, and then they're really hitting it hard in high school. You can go to the next slide. So, I'll preface just like Ryan did, this is something I did in isolation. This is a sample of what a master schedule could look like. Now, you'll notice flex is at the start of the day. Plenty of people want flex at the end of the day. Plenty of people want it right before lunch. Some people won't want flex at all. That's the work a scheduling committee will be going about doing. This schedule, this mock-up schedule, is to show that we could easily fit this and fit lunch waves very easily within our cafeteria with 3 lunch waves. It would be a pretty standard middle school schedule where 2 blocks of the day are a little disrupted with them being different times for grades 6, 7, and 8, but the rest of the day would be aligned. Now, this schedule is not aligned with what the high school schedule currently is. That will be something we have to investigate with the scheduling committee to see where do we need to have more independence as a middle school, where is it that we can still have capacity for shared staffing. For example, in this schedule that was put together, there is still capacity for shared staff during the A block and G block, based off how the high school schedule was built. So obviously keeping in mind we do have shared staffing needs with world language, with math, that wouldn't be ignored. It's something that can be done, but we can still allow the middle school schedule to meet specific individual needs for the middle school students. Next slide. Here's a sample of how those look in grades 6, 7, and 8. Another thing I'm excited about is it brings us back to PE and health being something that students have every other day throughout the year, as opposed to having just a quarter here and a quarter there of PE, which is something that's really hard for a middle schooler who needs to get that energy out. It shifts from what is currently a very complex 6-day rotation with a 7-drop-2 schedule to a far more simple, every class meets every day for between 42 and 48 minutes. And for the unified arts classes, they meet every other day. Very simple, easy to explain, easy to see. 6th graders have a similar schedule to this now with the fact that they have departmentalized at Brownstone for a majority of their classes. This would not be that different from what their current experience is. Win would be what is where they would kind of we'd learn from them too, and how to best align our flex and their win blocks to make this work. You know, you'll notice the names of courses in there for unified arts. Things like media studies. Part of that includes the expansion of that library media and really bringing in that 6th grade to have a full middle school culture. We'll go to the next slide. And then we get to the benefits of what we get out of having a great 6th grade middle school. And there's a ton. And again, like I said at the start, it's no longer transitioning them to middle school, transitioning them to high school. We get to develop a middle school experience. Now, I wouldn't look to change the name. Most middle schools I've been at are part of the high school culture in terms of that mascot, and we've done a lot of work at becoming the Highlanders here, and we're very proud of that identity at this complex, and we want to make a change there. But we do want to identify what that means for a middle schooler. More time to build partnerships with parents and relationships with those families as we expand them along the middle school experience. If any of you have a middle school is a tough year. Those are tough years of those early teenage years, a lot of transitions and times, and kids need a focus during that time. We don't want to just get them ready for high school. We want to stay in those moments of middle school and help them continue to develop during those crucial years so that we can do that effectively. We're going to have a lot of increased enrollment in our extracurriculars, both our clubs and our athletics. Sixth grade are currently eligible, but based off of CIAC, to be part of middle school sports. So this would enable sixth graders to come be part of our track team, be part of our basketball team, be part of our cross-country team, enabling our students in our community to take advantage of extracurricular athletics, and as well as our big expansion of what is currently offered at the elementary level when it comes to clubs and extracurriculars. We'd have a lot more interest and a lot more participation and give those sixth graders a really good experience. Like I said, increasing, for the programs themselves, increasing the pipeline for our athletics programs. The basketball program, which becomes a very competitive team at our high school, doesn't start in grade 7, it starts in grade 6. One more year of that student-athlete development for our kiddos. PE health, again, I mentioned before, returning to something they have year-round and not something that's segmented into different quarters throughout the year. Elective opportunities. I'm very excited about being able to expand with a whole other grade and more unified art staff, expand elective opportunities beyond band and chorus to things including computer science, which is a vital thing for our students and what they do going forward to our middle school kids. Increased opportunities for mentorship and leadership, having 8th grade leaders that are able to guide and help support 6th graders as they come into the middle school. Just the benefit of being on more of a shared larger campus that includes an elementary school, that the shared staffing components, Ryan mentioned before, our multilingual staff member who has to travel between all the buildings now, her travel goes between up and down the hill. It's the same thing with our students, more opportunities to collaborate with our one building that we transition with, as opposed to planning for so many, right? It's very easy to have my teachers collaborate with the 5th grade when all they have to do is go down the hill, as opposed to getting in cars and traveling around the district. Opportunity to expand world language out to grade 6, to me this is something that is critical, something we really need to look at, especially around our world language program to really strengthen it for our district. And then finally, and this is the big one, so I have a star on it, the potential opportunity to go from a current schedule that is geared more towards a high school student towards one that's geared towards a middle school student gives the opportunity to expand instructional minutes anywhere from 350 per course per year to 1,200 minutes per course per year. And as a middle school principal who's really working trying to up the math and ELA scores and performance of my students, that's something that would be critically valuable to get more instructional minutes for our students here at the middle school. Thank you.
So, I think the way we have the presentation structured so far, we sort of had a little historical overview, a look at what a consolidated school would look like. We've heard from our 2 of our principals that this is possible and doable. Our faculty and staff would be excited to see this happen. The leadership capacity is here. Now I need to pivot to talk about how much this would cost. Premise this by saying, very quickly the Facility Study Committee recognized there's no cheap and easy way out of this, right? That if there were, we would have found it. So let me start here by saying these costs were developed by 3 different groups, Fryer Architects and 2 construction companies, Gilbane and Downs, took a look at the renderings and the ed specs and came out with these numbers. The anticipated conceptual budget cost for the construction, $52 million, and then we have to talk about soft costs. This is like your contingency money, right? This is money that may be spent, may not, but when you're building a budget, you always have to have a buffer. Total cost, $66,126,000 to create that pre-K-5 to school, pre-K to 5 to school. Next slide, please. Here's most important. Now, project cost $66 million. Ineligible costs $17 million. Now, I have that starred because I'm going to talk about that in a minute. These are your contingency costs. Those are those soft costs that aren't built into the construction. State reimbursement, I have at 45%. I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. If this panned out the way we have it here, the total cost for the town of Portland would be $44,438,000. Next slide, please. I have to spend a minute talking about an eligible cost. That 17 million, that is what would go out to the state without an expectation that we reimburse it until we spend it. Now, Mike can tell you, and I see him nodding, that once you get going in the project and you start identifying places to spend that money, then it becomes eligible, right? So 17 million goes out as ineligible to the state to start, means we don't get reimbursed for that. But as soon as the project starts and you start spending this money down, very quickly, a large portion of that 17 million does become eligible for state reimbursement. And I do see Mike and Bryce nodding. There may be questions about that at the end, but that's an important consideration. Next slide, please. State reimbursement. Okay, this is complicated, but I'm going to do my best. How much you get back from the state is determined annually by something called the town's ANGLIC rating. That is the adjusted equalized net grand list. That's the value of all of your properties in town. This year, our ANGLIC rating is 49%. 2 years ago, it was 51%. It went from 51 to 49, right? It's going down, which means that the net grand list in Portland is going up. This is something we want to be very careful of because I know there are two big developments going on in town. I don't know how those two will influence the ANGLIC rating, but the trend is already down. Right now, we're at 49%. We won't know our ANGLIC rating until July 1 when the state recalculates it. I put 45%, and Fryer and the construction companies used 45% to be super conservative, right? Our hope is that on July 1 we find it's 49% or even 50%. But for now, I think with the numbers that we're projecting, I want to stay on the very conservative side, so I used 45% as a placeholder. Next slide, please. So while it says local share 44 million, right, Gilbane and Fryer and Downs will likely tell you that the real number is going to be somewhere closer to 35 to 37 million. You won't know that real number, and I know this is going to be frustrating, but we won't know that actual number until the audit is completed at the end of the project. After the building's got its CO and a year goes by, then you'll know it, right? But from past experience, the construction companies and the architects will tell us that on a $66 million project, once those ineligible costs become eligible for reimbursement and we learn the real estate reimbursement rate, we're going to be in the $35 to $37 million range in terms of what the town share is. Next slide, please. But for the sake of this exercise, let's be conservative. Let's err on the side of costing more than less. I don't want to undersell this, right? So let's say 44 million is the number. Now again, based on the process of the ineligible cost becoming eligible and the actual state reimbursement, we know it's likely to be in the 35 to 37 million range, but let's use 44 million just so that we stay conservative. I asked Ryan and he reached out to our town financial planner and I got these numbers back from our town financial planner. At 44 million, if you borrowed that amount at a 4.5% interest rate over 30 years, that alone would raise your mill rate 2.93 mils, or for a home assessed at $250,000, that's $730,000 a year. Okay. Now again, we don't know if that's the amount it will be, but for the sake of this exercise, right, let's stay with that number because it's more, well more than we think it will actually end up at. Now, this is why we're adding a financial literacy class for all of our students at Portland High School, because it's important to know when you borrow money or invest money, you're either paying interest or earning interest. Over a 30-year period, to borrow $44 million with a 4.5% interest, you're paying back $83,417,000. That's a considerable amount of money. Everybody follow me so far? Next slide, please. Now, there are some significant offsetting savings to reduce to an elementary school. This is what I really need people to hear. You're going to spend $83 million over 30 years in the worst-case scenario, right? But if you consolidate to one school, I'm being, again, very conservative. We will be able to reduce out of our operating budget 2 administrators, 4 teachers, 2 nurses, 3 custodians, 3 administrative assistants, 2 paraprofessionals. Because we don't need those people to run 3 schools. You know, we're only going to have 1 school. Additionally, I'm conservatively projecting we can reduce a bus because we're going to move the 6th grade to the high school run, and the high school run, because kids drive at high school, they're half empty, but you know, there's plenty of space. And by taking the 6th grade off the elementary run, I project we can reduce from 9 big buses on the road every morning and afternoon to 8. 1 bus run costs us $65,000 a year. So I think we can reduce that from the budget. Additionally, your electricity, your heating, your upkeep, your gas, all of your mechanicals and utilities and phone. I'm confident, and I'm being conservative here, I think it will be significantly higher, but I'm being super conservative with everyone tonight, that we will save $200,000 a year because we're not paying the utilities and mechanicals on 3 buildings, we're paying it on 1. And that 1 building, the architects will tell you, is going to be designed in a very energy efficient way, 5-star rating. So it will be more efficient. So I think that number 200,000 will be higher, but I'm going conservative. I conservatively project that if we consolidate to 1 school, you can take $1,200,000 out of the Board of Education operating budget and sufficiently staff and maintain the 2 remaining facilities, the pre-K-5 school and the new 6-12 school. Now again, the power of compounding interest. If you take $1.2 million, add 3% a year, general cost of wage, cost of living adjustment, you know, nothing cost 3% last year that doesn't cost at least 3% more next year. Generally speaking, if you add 3% to $1 million and amortize it out over a 30-year period, at the end of that 30-year period, you will have spent $57 million. So, next slide, please. Offering you some food for thought, Portland. You heard from the principals, and you're hearing from me, that we believe that by consolidating to a pre-K-5 school and moving the 6th grade here, we will achieve the priorities set forth by our facility study committee. I believe our children will have a wonderful school with great indoor air quality, designed to maximize security, and that promotes a really high-quality teaching and learning environment. Next slide, please. So here's the question, and I leave you all to ponder. Is Portland willing to spend up to, it's up to, $83,417,000 over 30 years and save $57 million in staffing and overhead costs by creating a pre-K to 5 school? That's the question that the town needs to consider. Next slide, please. If the town decides the answer to that question I just asked is no, if anybody's here tonight to tell me no, Charles, everybody's going to go home tonight and jump on Facebook and say, this was a terrible presentation, how could we possibly do this? Right, in a nice way, because we're going to be civil in our discourse. If anybody's going to go home tonight and say, no, Charles, this is a horrible idea, the only option then is to do capital improvements and maintain 3 elementary schools. I'm telling you, Portland, you can't not do anything. If we're not going to consolidate to 1 school, the second choice out of Great Blue is to keep 3 elementary schools. Here are the costs over a 10-year period that we know from both Fryer and Sightlines that we need to keep these schools running. We need $6 million in capital improvements at Valley View, almost $9 million at Gildersleeve, and about $10 million at Brownstone. These aren't major, massive improvements. These are what we need to slap them together and keep them going for the next 30 years. That's $25 million. Now again, if Portland went out and borrowed $25 million at 4.5% interest rate over 30 years, the power of compounding interest, be careful when you borrow money, right? This is what we're going to teach our children. You will spend that $45 million over that 30-year period. Next slide, please. So here are your options, Portland. You can either consolidate to one elementary school and spend $83 million over the next 30 years. But you will save $57 million because you're not going to be paying for the principals and secretaries and custodians and upkeep and transportation on those buildings. At the end of that 30-year, 83 minus the 57 million, you're spending 26 million to 326,000. Or fix up the schools you have and spend 45 million in capital investments over the next 30 years. You're also going to spend for the principals, the custodians, and the secretaries because you need people to run buildings and keep them safe. Look at your cost, 102 million. Do you want to spend a net of 26, or do you want to spend 102 million as a town over the next 30 years? Food for thought. Next slide, please. Or there's the next logical third option. Go bash me on Facebook, tell me I'm wrong, and encourage your community to do nothing. Get out there and start a movement that this is all horrible, we don't need to do anything. Charles is wrong, Bob is wrong, Sightlines is wrong. If you do that, here are your options. You can spend 26 million to consolidate net cost between the bonding and the savings, or do the capital improvements and you'll spend 102, or do nothing. If you do nothing, here are your costs. You won't bond anything. It'll be zero. Maybe we'll pretend that we fund a capital improvement cycle, but we won't bond anything. It'll stay zero. I don't know what your costs will be for emergency repairs. I promise you it won't be zero. Within the next 30 years, if you don't do any work on our schools, something is going to break. They break all the time. Bob, do I see your head shaking? Things are breaking all the time. The costs for emergency repairs are significant now, and they will become more significant as we go through the future and more time and wear and tear occurs on our buildings. So that's TBD. If we continue to do nothing, the disruption to teaching and learning could be significant. I am already dismissing schools early when the heat index goes above 90. That affects instructional minutes for students. I have to delay schools when there's a heavy rainstorm and the wind blows the right way so that our custodians can mop up the water that floods Valley View. Those are the disruptions we're experiencing now. If we do nothing, I promise you at some point, it may not be me, but some superintendent in the next 30 years is going to tell you that school can't operate, it's not safe for kids because you didn't maintain it. So, 30 years to do nothing, you won't bond anything. TBD, I'll let you know when I come to you for emergency supplementals on emergency repairs. I'll let you know if I keep the schools open because they've fallen apart and the roof is collapsed. And you'll still spend $57 million for the people to run those schools. So here are the real options for the town. Over the next 30 years, do you want to spend $6 million? Do you want to spend 122? Or do you want to spend 57? And I'll let you know when I can't keep the schools open any longer because they fail. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm sure there are questions, but what about the secondary school? We've heard that there are expenses at the secondary school. Yes, we know the secondary school needs approximately $11 million worth of work, right? Opened in 2004. It's got these years under it. Over the next 10 years, it's going to need $11 million worth of work. That's what Sightlines and Fryer have identified in terms of the work for the middle school and high school. However, I am going to make a suggestion, and I'm going to say the capital needs at the secondary school are significant, but they're not at that critical level that Valley View, Gildersleeve, and Brownstone are. Valley View, Gildersleeve, and Brownstone are code red. The secondary school is code yellow. Therefore, I recommend focusing on the elementary schools. Let the dust settle if we consolidate to one school and make sure we're not at that $44 million number, that hopefully the Anglic rating gets us a higher reimbursement rate, and those soft costs become eligible, and we're closer to 35, 36 million. Let's wait for that audit to be done when the new pre-K-5 school is built, and also let the land use committee do its work. I know that committee's meeting, I know there's going to be expenses associated with what happens to a decommissioned Gildersleeve and Brownstone. So I wouldn't suggest at this point taking a bite at the whole apple. I would suggest focus on the elementary schools, let the dust settle on the elementary schools, we figure out what the impact on the mill rate is when you factor in the savings from the staffing and overhead, and let the work of the land use committee do its job. One carve out here is, next year is the last year that the state is offering a 50% coupon reimbursement for any HVAC work you do at the secondary school. We can replace all of the air handling units on the building here and put in a beautiful deionization system for $1,500,000, of which $750,000 would be reimbursed by the state for one more year. If we don't do that work next year, that grant will go away, and then all of it will be factored into the 11 million. If we figure out a way to get ourselves some funding and work on the HVAC here at the high school, during this last year of the state HVAC grant, you're doubling your money. So that's something I would certainly throw out there as a consideration, but the recommendation is, let's leave the high school, middle school for now. If you're going to do anything with the high school, middle school, focus on the HVAC system, especially now with the one-year grant reimbursement, but otherwise, the critical need is at the elementary schools. Is that my last slide? That's it? Okay. In order to accomplish all of this, I'm sure there are questions, and I'm going to get to those, but here's what we would need to do. If the community is convinced, if the question I asked you is the community willing to spend 86 million with a net cost of 26? If the community is willing to do that, how do we get there? What needs to happen? Right? This spring, over the next 3 or 4 months here, the Board of Education has to vote to approve the Ed Specs plan. So I've written the Ed Specs plan. That's what Fryer Architects used to come up with the renderings. The Board of Education has seen it. There's a couple tweaks I need to make to it based on input from Bryce and Mike, but the Board of Education would need to vote at some point over the next few months to approve the Ed Specs plan. The Board of Selectmen would need to take action on a question, a bonding question, assuming that question was put forth to the town of Portland in November on the federal election. So approval of the Ed Specs plan would be from this governing body, approval of a question with the dollar amount that would go on the federal election. I need both of those votes notarized and included in a grant application that I submit to the state of Connecticut. Stephanie and I will work very hard over the month of May and June. The deadline is June 30th. So if I have those two motions and an affirmative feedback from the town that this is where we want to go, Charles, I need those two motions, and then I need to write a grant and I submit it to the state by June 30th. Then I enjoy my summer. It will be much needed. Next school year, in November, people will go out and vote in the federal election and on the question put forward. If the town of Portland is convinced that this is what you want for your town and your students, and it passes at referendum, we'll have potentially new elected representatives in our country and an approved bonding referendum. That would need to happen in November. If the referendum passes, the Board of Selectmen will form a building committee. The first thing that building committee will do will hire an architecture firm. I got some good recommendations. We'll hire an architecture firm to get going on the design phase. So then all next school year, our kids are in the same grade level configuration, no change. The year after that, the 2025-2026 school year, we empty out value. Grades pre-K, K, 1, and 2 go to Gildersleeve. Grades 3, 4, and 5 go to Brownstone. There's more than enough room in those schools with some updating of classrooms to accommodate those students, which empties out Valley View. The 6th grade goes to the middle school, and as you know, we have enough room for them right now. So that would be a big adjustment for our community. Pre-K, K1, 2, Gildersleeve, 3, 4, 5, Brownstone. 6th grade comes up here to the middle school. At some point in that year, the demolition and the work begins at Valley View while the architects are designing the big blueprints for the new school. The next year, that's when you'll see a construction company working on the new school, designing the pre-K to 5. During that time, the 6th grade stays here, 3 through 5 Brownstone, pre-K to 2 stays at Gildersleeve. The nice thing about this, we're hearing, is that by having the existing swing space, it cuts down on your costs significantly because we're not having to do construction around kids. Valley View is emptied out. Also, the hope is that the construction gets done in a timely way so that the new building can do something called off-gassing, which gets it ready for our students and air it out essentially for full occupancy in what would be the 2027-2028 school year. Pre-K to 5 would move in, and the land use committee would hopefully have some really good ideas by then about what happens to a decommission to Valley View and Gildersleeve. This would be your most ambitious timeline, again, depending on votes from the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen this spring, and an affirmative referendum from the town in November. How did I do? Hour and a half. That's all my presentation, folks. I can't imagine there's not questions. Sorry.
Well, I have quite a few, Charles, and
Yep.
by going through this and wanting to look further into what Fryer came up with as far as, conceptual and their drawings and the layout, I was wondering if we could possibly have another joint Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen meeting where we could digest all the information we just got, come back, ask the questions to Fryer, to you, to get some input, because there's a lot in there, and I don't think, after listening to you and everyone else just continually talking for an hour and a half, has given us the time to really look and see what we want out of the questions we want to ask. So that's just my request.
I know I would be happy. I know that I speak for Ryan and Chuck. I see them nodding. They would be happy to come back. And I imagine that Bryce and Mike are also a little tired. Maybe digest all this, put it all on the website, and we find another schedule. That would be fine by me. It's your prerogative.
I think we could do that, Charles, yeah. I think there's a lot of information presented right now. I think it would do, both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education well to digest, come up with questions. I mean, certainly we can ask questions now as well, but I think a second meeting would definitely be helpful.
Oh, I agree 100%. It was a great presentation, by the way, really.
And I'll share it with you tonight. And
I was hoping we'd
you'll
be
get it
able to-
tonight, and I'll put it on the
Yeah.
website. The recording and the presentation will all be on the website by this time tomorrow.
Yeah, great.
This will be on YouTube too, right, for the...
Yes.
Thank you.
It's already there.
Yeah, good.
So do you want to adjourn and reschedule, or did you want to?
I'll ask the board, so what do you guys think? You want to postpone questions for now and come back and digest the material, and I think that's probably...
I just have just one question that I know the facilities committee study and Blue Pear's team, they all had the option about closing one school, so is that off the table?
So from what I understand, that was the third selection on the Great Blue Circuit. The first one being the consolidation to pre-K 5, second, capital improvements at all three. I haven't done the level of deep dive here with ed specs and renderings and Fryer work and input and cost projections on a consolidated to Brownstone and Valley View and just decommission together. I use my sense of inference that this was the direction the community wanted to go first.
So I can just touch on that too, because that was one question that I've received a lot based on the survey was,
The number one choice from the responses we received was to close Gildersleeve and Brownstone. But number two was capital improvements only. I think the reason for that was because the closed Gildersleeve school model meant that we had to renovate Brownstone as well, which meant it had the highest price tag of the three options. So I don't think it was closing one school was I think the town would support that. It's just having to renovate both Valley View and Brownstone put the price out of most people's what they wanted. That helps to answer your question.
And I think that the Brownstone model also had too much space, and so what do you use that space for, and how do you share it? The town would have to take part of it over, and it was very unclear. There were a lot of questions about that particular building. I think another meeting would be helpful. There's a lot. I mean, the question is, do you want to break the bank? Do you want to put taxpayers paying for something that, when we get done, is still going to be three old schools, or do you want one school and move forward? And I think it really comes down to what our pocketbooks will approve. But what I heard tonight were some really good reasons to consolidate, in that educationally, the best practices would be consolidated into a K-5 school.
Charles, how quickly would we have to reconvene for you to feel comfortable with your timelines?
Right.
That's a great question. So, again, the question that would need to go to the residents of Portland for a vote, we've been working under the assumption that it would be November, right? If it's not November and it's later, then I would have another year to write the grant, because the grants are always due June 30th. So if we're staying on the most assertive timeline, Stephanie and I have a lot of work to do, and Briar's going to help us get a grant ready and submitted by June 30th. And that's with the November presidential election. If a decision is not made by then it's the next June 30th, which pushes the whole timeline forward a year. Does that make sense? So that June 30th state deadline for a grant submission is the only thing hanging over our head, and that reflects the timeline I put forward.
Very good.
But in terms of meeting that June 30th deadline, if that's our intention, then we do have time to schedule an additional meeting, and for the Board of Education to meet and take action on an ed specifications plan, and for the Board of Selectmen to take action on a question to send a referendum. There is time between now and June 30th for all of that to fit in.
I have one other question for the boards, I guess. With us having this meeting where we'll be asking some questions, would we be able to have a public comment at that meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can. And also, public comment is available at every Board of Selectmen meeting. There's 2 public comments at every Board of Selectmen meeting. So our next meeting is May 1st. So if this meeting hasn't taken place, the next meeting, the next joint meeting, I would invite any member of the public to attend a Board of Selectmen meeting. I know everyone, we all read social media. We're pretty much, I read the River East, I know everyone does. We like to stay in tune with what the residents in town are thinking and feeling about this. These are very big decisions. I know now any person on this board does not take these decisions lightly. And so I think we need to do our due diligence to hear from the community. I think we'll do that at an upcoming meeting. I think probably within 2 weeks we would have we would convene again, and we'll make sure that we get that out. And I think Sean's right. We should have definitely a public comment. This is a special meeting. It was a lot. I think our superintendent did a good job presenting this evening, as well as the other speakers. I want to thank them all. It's a lot of material. There's a lot of work went into this. Nothing here was taken lightly. Everything has been combed over, and many, many hours have gone into this. So I think that we should take some time, come back, come up with some questions, comments, and then also open it up to the public so we can hear what the public thinks as well, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
So if there's no more questions or comments, and
I just got a comment, just to remind what Charles started out with, though. Next week, he will have 3 sessions to answer questions, because at these meetings for public comment, it's great to hear what people have to say, but if they have a question, we're not going to answer it there.
Yeah, so
What were those days again?
So
Yeah.
one community forum, which isn't just for comment, it's come ask me questions or anybody challenge my numbers, challenge my logic, push me. I'm open to it. This Thursday, next Monday, next Wednesday, I'll make sure that goes out on the website and on email and social media. So those community forums are not, the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen audience of citizens is just comment. There's no discussion. There's forums that I'm going to have, come on in, give it to me.
I'll just add one more piece. John just reminded me, just so you know, we have a committee right now that is currently working on if we were to decommission Gildersleeve and Brownstone schools, what would we or could we do with those properties? What are the options? It's a terrific group of people that are working on this. They meet twice a month at least twice a month on Mondays in the Buck Foreman Community Room. I'd encourage anyone who wants to attend to come in person. Those meetings are also all recorded and online on YouTube. You can watch them. So that's a big decision. I know that was part of the survey that we took. The public, the town wants to know if we close 2 schools, what would happen to those properties? And we're working on presenting options for that as well. We're not there yet, but the group is working very hard on that. So if there's no more questions, comments, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All right, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere, let's get the room clear out. Yeah.
Turn around if I can see everybody here.
All right, will you let me know when we're good to go? All right, so it is, hearing a lot of noise.
I was moving around.
Yeah, we're just.
Oh, it's the microphone over there, sorry. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. It is 8:18. It's a special meeting, so we do not need to approve the agenda, but we are going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a special meeting for the purpose of addressing contract non-renewals, and so I'm going to ask Dr. Britton to talk us through this.
Right, so I'll be quick with you. So just so you know, the Personnel Committee met and discussed this. As you know, we're in a situation next year where we are reducing in force. So we're reducing a kindergarten section from 6 to 5, a first grade section from 6 to 5, a third grade section from 5 to 4, and then one position is still TBD. I'm working with my leadership team, and I'm going to be bringing back some recommendations to the board about what that is. Our hope, of course, is that we can fill or we can absorb those reductions through attrition, meaning that a teacher resigns, leaves, and gets another job, and then we don't have to cut anybody. And already, 2 positions have, I'm confident, I'm waiting for a letter of resignation on one, but I'm hearing that a teacher got another job and another teacher is going to be requesting a transfer, so I'm confident that at least 2 of those positions are going to be absorbed through attrition, but we don't count our chickens before they hatch, so we're in this uncomfortable spot where I'm going to recommend to you the non-renewal of 4 teachers' contracts. That will give us ample space, a buffer, to absorb both those reductions, which I don't think we're going to have to, and others if we needed them because of bumping. So my recommendation is Emily Davidson. She is, again, as a function of seniority.
Do we need to go into executive session?
Nope,
No, we
don't.
don't.
Yep.
Yeah, this all needs to be dealt with in public
Yeah.
session.
Emily Davidson, and this is based on seniority, Shane Farrelly, Christian Tessino, and oh my
Allie
God.
Furlong.
Allie Furlong, thank you. So those 4 teachers I've already spoken with. I met with them personally with the principals, explained this situation. They were obviously very upset, but understand that this is what we have to do. Hopefully, attrition will happen, the budget will pass, and we'll be reinstating them. They're wonderful teachers. This is not for cause. I would love to keep them here, and I'm confident we'll be able to, but I can't put the board in a compromised position fiscally, so we need to take this action to non-renew their contracts, and it has to be done prior to May 1st. So I believe, Tricia, you gave the motion?
I have it here.
Okay, yep. Otherwise, I'll answer questions and.
Yeah, do folks have any questions first? If not, Tim, are you willing to make the motion?
Sure.
Here, I got the,
Oh, that's something.
there you go.
I moved that the contract of employment of Emily Davidson, Shane Fairley, Allie Furlong, and Christian Tessino not be renewed for the following year upon its expiration at the end of the 23-24 school year, and that the superintendent of schools is directed to advise such persons in writing of this action.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Angela. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And with no other new business, I would take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Thanks, Tim. Seconded by Meg. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening. Great presentation.